Hey, here's another video from weldingtipsandtricks.com. This is part 2 of a fabrication series using the StrongHand Build Pro precision welding table. We're using it to fabricate 10 of these carts. We're going to be doing just a little bit of MIG and TIG welding today. And this is what we want to get to, the point where we're buttoning them up, putting the lid on, and shipping them. There's another view of the cart. It's got a stainless steel tubing handle with some stainless brackets and a stainless angle iron frame lid with sheet metal. So the last video, we put together the end panels that are made of square tubing, 1.5 inch square tubing, and then some 3/8 round stock that are just going to be retainers on the end of the PVC tubes to keep parts from falling out when they roll down the hallways. So you can see how easy that went together. Got them tacked up and then just stood them up on the end of the table with the same setup and just welded all the rods and everything, put those together, and I timed it, and they took almost exactly 5 minutes each to do, and I thought that was pretty amazing because it's just a huge time saver. So the next thing is just kind of improvise a little bit and use some of the rest of the tooling package, the taller right angle riser pieces, to get that first 90-degree angle again. No problem, because of the holes are at 90 degrees. So if you put stops in the holes without slots on them, just the holes to the holes, you have a perfect 90-degree first angle. And then getting the thing square, piece of cake too, because the right angle riser pieces are so perfectly square. Just using some pieces with slots in them, able to get a place to clamp very easily. And then again, using these spring-loaded stops, I was able to put the straight pieces that connect everything together without even clamping them together. So spending about 30 minutes setting up the fixturing saves a whole bunch of time when you got 10 or more of something like this to do. I've got this one sped up. I got the video right here sped up, obviously just a little bit, but just in the interest of making the video as short as possible, not losing your attention. You can see this thing puts together just like a puzzle, and these one-handed clamps are awesome because oftentimes, when you're fabricating stuff like this, you've only got one hand to use. You've got something else in the other hand. So getting a whole bunch of tacks on here. I even edited some of them out, but I've got a whole bunch of tacks before I start welding. Once I figure it's got enough tacks, it's not going to move anywhere. Just undo all the clamps. And then what I did is I just picked this thing up and slid it over so I'd have access to these welds right here. I like to use a little forward and back type motion, a little like 2 steps forward, 1 step back for MIG welds like this. A lot of times that's just one way of doing things. Another way, there's all kinds of other ways actually. But the reason I do it is because it just helps me see where I'm going and just puts a nice little ripple pattern in the weld. Another method is just doing a series of cursive E's like this, just staying on the front of the puddle, having it set good and hot, where you get good penetration and decent looking weld. For downhill, same thing, a little series of cursive E's. It plays the light for me and helps me see where I'm going if I do some type of little motion like that rather than just a steady, straight drag. All right, once those are done, I figured out a little trick here to just lift it up and then rest it on the 90-degree stops and then tilt it down and let it rest on the floor, and that gave me access to those other 2 welds without having to do a whole lot of moving and repositioning this thing. And then one last little overhead weld. A lot easier just to kneel down and button that thing up than it is to reposition the whole thing, and that one's done. And I'm stacking them up. Stacking them up like cordwood. Whatever that means. Country boy say it one time. Alright, next thing would be weld these pads on where the casters bolt on. You see there's a hole pattern that the customer can adjust the casters however they want. And then next thing is weld the eye bolts on. This didn't require any fixturing at all. Just laid them up there and weld them up. The next thing after that is get the handles done. So first thing, it's a lot easier just to fabricate the handle assembly up with the handle brackets, the holes in them, and the tubing, and get them all straight and square, and then put them on the once they're welded, put them on the rack. And I'll show you how that goes together. Just using a standard just grabbed the angle riser block here because I know it's a good 90 degree and good surface to clamp to. Put one bracket like that, slip the tubing in, and a similar arrangement on the other end with slots in it, a 90 degree stop, and using the edge of the table again to line it and make sure it's straight. I'm just put it in there like that, and then I get my fit up just like this, and that's just about perfect. That's what I want. I want it slightly recessed so that I can roll the corner in for filler metal. All right, the way I tack here, I like to tack weld things like this with a TIG torch with a switch instead of a pedal, and set the amperage about twice what I would weld it at, and just blast it really quickly with a quick on-off of the switch. To weld them, I could just use my current setup. One of those blocks gave me a good place to clamp to, and didn't have to do anything different there. That was a pleasant surprise. And so, about 60 amps here on the TIG torch. I like to just make tiny little circles, and that way I can roll the corner of the tubing. This one didn't quite get recessed as much as I would like it, but I can still roll the corner of that tubing in for filler metal and come up with a decent looking weld. Again, while I've got the TIG machine hooked up, just using it with those short blasts to get tacks on it. I had this thing marked, so it didn't require anything much to get them tacked up other than holding them on the marks, popping a quick tack, and then sewing them up. And that gets me to this point right here. That allowed the shop to go ahead and have them painted, and then no further painting would be needed, maybe some minor touch-up, but then we could put the PVC pipe in and then the lids, and then we'd be done with no further painting. So next week's video, we're going to fabricate these, frame up these stainless steel angle iron lids with a sheet metal lid, about 14 gauge. And the very last thing is we're going to weld them up underneath there where they're not painted for about 1/4 inch, and they'll be done. Stay tuned for part 3.